The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Charlotte Windsor had been practicing piano in the East Wing music room for nearly 3 hours, her fingers moving mechanically across the ivory keys. The 17-year-old princess had always found solace in music, but today felt different. The walls seemed to close in around her. The ornate room that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a gilded cage. Outside the heavy oak door, Royal Guard Marcus Thompson stood at attention. As he had done every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months, he had grown accustomed to the sound of Charlotte's piano practice, the way certain melodies would repeat as she perfected difficult passages. But something about today's session troubled him. The music kept stopping and starting, and he could hear the princess moving around the room in an agitated manner. Charlotte's parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, had left for a diplomatic visit to Scotland that morning. They would be gone for 3 days, leaving Charlotte under the watchful eye of her grandmother, the Queen Mother, and the palace staff. It was supposed to be a quiet week. Charlotte had exams coming up at her private academy, and she had requested extra time to study and practice her music. No one questioned it. Charlotte was known as the responsible one, the princess who never caused trouble. But responsibility had become a burden that Charlotte could no longer carry alone. For months, she had been hiding a secret that threatened to unravel everything her family stood for. It started innocently enough 6 months ago when she met Daniel, a music student from the Royal Academy, during a charity concert. He was brilliant, passionate about music, completely unaware of the protocols and restrictions that governed Charlotte's every move. They began meeting in secret, always careful, always cautious. Daniel would wait in the gardens while Charlotte practiced, and they would steal moments together between her official duties. 3 weeks ago, Charlotte discovered she was pregnant. The news hit her like a physical blow. She was 17, unmarried, and the daughter of the future king. The scandal would be unprecedented. She couldn't tell her parents, couldn't tell anyone. Daniel had been supportive when she told him, promising they would figure it out together. But Charlotte knew the palace would never allow it. They would separate her from Daniel, send her away somewhere quiet until after the baby was born, and then the child would be adopted out to a suitable family. She would be expected to return to her royal duties as if nothing had happened. The pressure had been building inside her for weeks. She barely slept, barely ate. Her lady-in-waiting had noticed she looked pale and asked if she was feeling well. Charlotte blamed it on exam stress and increased her isolation. She spent more and more time in the music room. It's the only place where she could think clearly, where the music drowned out the constant anxiety. Today, something inside her finally broke. She had been playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major when her hands suddenly froze on the keys. The silence in the room was deafening. She looked around at the portraits of her ancestors lining the walls, all of them staring down at her with judgment in their painted eyes. She thought about the life growing inside her, about Daniel waiting for her call, about the impossible choice she faced. Charlotte stood abruptly, the piano bench scraping against the floor. She walked to the window and stared out at the gardens below. Tourists were gathered at the gates, taking pictures, hoping for a glimpse of royalty. They saw the glamour, the privilege, the fairy tale. They didn't see the gilded bars of the cage. She pressed her hands against the cold glass, feeling trapped, suffocated by duty and tradition and expectations. Marcus heard the piano bench move and tensed slightly. He had been trained to recognize unusual sounds, anything that might indicate a security threat or a problem. The silence that followed made him uneasy. He had strict orders never to interrupt the princess during her practice unless there was an emergency. But his instincts told him something was wrong. Inside the room, Charlotte's breathing became rapid and shallow. Panic attack. She'd been having them more frequently over the past few weeks. Her chest tightened, and the room started to spin. She backed away from the window, her vision blurring. The portraits seemed to move, closing in on her. She needed air, needed to get out, but the door seemed impossibly far away. She stumbled toward it, her legs weak. Her hand reached for the ornate handle, but it wouldn't turn. Locked. She tried again, pulling harder. The door remained firmly shut. Confusion mixed with panic. Why was it locked? It was never locked during her practice sessions. She pulled again and again, her rational mind knowing she could simply call out to Marcus. But panic had taken over. Charlotte pounded on the door with both fists. Her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. The walls were closing in. She couldn't breathe. The secret she had been carrying alone for weeks felt like it was crushing her chest. She needed out. Out of this room, out of this palace, out of this life that had been chosen for her before she was even born. Her voice, when it finally came, was raw and desperate. Echoing through the music room and beyond the heavy door to wear, Marcus stood frozen in shock at what he was hearing from the always composed princess. "Let me out." Marcus Thompson's hand moved instinctively to his radio, but he hesitated. The scream from inside the music room had sent ice through his veins. In 6 months of guarding Princess Charlotte, he had never heard her raise her voice, let alone scream with such desperation. The training manual was clear about protocol. But nothing in his years of service had prepared him for this moment. He pressed his ear against the door, listening. He could hear Charlotte's ragged breathing, the sound of her hands still pounding against the wood. Something was very wrong. Marcus made his decision in a split second. He grabbed the door handle and turned it, expecting resistance, but the door swung open easily. It had never been locked at all. Charlotte stumbled backward as the door flew open, her face flushed and tear-streaked. She looked at Marcus with wild eyes, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. For a moment, they both stood frozen, the guard and the princess. Separated by protocol and propriety, but united in this unexpected moment of crisis. Marcus's training kicked in. He quickly scanned the room for threats, but everything appeared normal. The grand piano sat untouched in the center, sheet music scattered across its top. The windows were secure. No signs of an intruder. His eyes returned to Charlotte, and he saw something that alarmed him more than any physical threat could have. The princess was having a panic attack. "Your Royal Highness," he began, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Are you injured? Is there someone in the room?" Charlotte shook her head, unable to form words. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces that felt like they were falling apart. Marcus took a careful step into the room, maintaining a respectful distance but positioning himself where he could help if she collapsed. "I need you to breathe slowly," he said, his voice gentle. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that for me?" Charlotte tried to follow his instructions, but her breath kept catching. She sank down onto the piano bench, her whole body trembling. Marcus had younger sisters. He recognized the signs of someone drowning in their own thoughts. He moved closer, still maintaining appropriate distance, but near enough that his presence could be steadying. "I'm going to call the palace physician," Marcus said, reaching for his radio again. "No." Charlotte's voice cracked as she finally found words. "Please, no. Don't call anyone. I'm fine. I couldn't breathe." The door. "I thought it was locked." Marcus looked at the door, then back at Charlotte. The door had never been locked. He had been standing right outside it. This was about something else entirely, something beyond his pay grade and training. But he couldn't just walk away and leave the princess in this state. "With respect, Your Highness, you're not fine," Marcus said quietly. "I can see that. You don't have to tell me what's wrong, but I do need to make sure you're safe." Charlotte looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. Marcus Thompson was probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a steady presence. He had always been professional, almost invisible in the way good guards were supposed to be. But right now, he was the only person in the world who had witnessed her breakdown. And somehow, that made him the only person she could talk to. "If I tell you something," Charlotte whispered, "can you promise not to tell anyone? Not the Queen Mother, not my parents, not anyone?" Marcus felt the weight of what was coming. He knew he shouldn't make promises he couldn't keep, especially not to a member of the royal family. But something in Charlotte's eyes, a vulnerability and desperation he had never seen before, made him nod slowly. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to help you," he said carefully. "But if you're in danger, I may not be able to keep that secret." Charlotte laughed bitterly. I'm not in danger. Well, not the kind you mean. She took a shaky breath, and then the words tumbled out. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity. Marcus kept his face neutral, though his mind raced. This was bigger than he could have imagined. The implications were staggering. He thought of the media frenzy, the scandal, the impact on the royal family. But mostly, he thought of the terrified 17-year-old girl sitting in front of him. Carrying a burden far too heavy for someone so young. How far along? He asked, his voice still calm. 8 weeks, Charlotte said. Maybe 9. The father is Daniel, a music student. We've been seeing each other in secret. He knows, and he wants to help. But what can he do? He's not royal. He's not even wealthy. The palace will never accept him. Marcus nodded slowly. He had seen Daniel a few times, waiting in the gardens. He had reported it to his supervisor, who had dismissed it as harmless. A princess was entitled to have friends. If only they had known. Does anyone else know? Marcus asked. Charlotte shook her head. Just you and Daniel. I haven't even been to a doctor. I've been too scared. I keep thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the tests were wrong, but I know I'm not. I can feel it. Marcus sat down on a nearby chair, forgetting protocol for a moment. This was too big for standing at attention. Your Highness, you need medical care. Regardless of everything else, you need to make sure you're healthy. I know, Charlotte whispered. But the moment I see a palace physician, everyone will know. They'll tell my parents, and then everything will spiral out of control. They'll take over my life completely. They'll decide everything. Where I go, what happens to the baby, whether I ever see Daniel again. I'll have no say in any of it. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment, weighing his options. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family, but he had never imagined protection would look like this. Charlotte wasn't facing an assassin or a terrorist threat. She was facing the weight of tradition, expectation, and a system that had been in place for centuries. In many ways, that was a more formidable enemy than any he had been trained to fight. I have a sister, Marcus said finally. Claire, she got pregnant when she was 18. Different circumstances, obviously, but I remember how scared she was. How alone she felt, even though our whole family was there to support her. Charlotte looked up, surprised that he was sharing something personal. Guards didn't usually do that. They were supposed to be invisible, professional, detached. What happened to her? Charlotte asked. She had the baby. A little girl named Emma. Claire finished school, became a teacher. It wasn't easy, but she did it. Emma's 7 now and she's brilliant. Claire says that having Emma young was the hardest thing she ever did, but also the best decision she ever made. But your family supported her, Charlotte said. Mine will see this as a disaster. A scandal. Something to be managed and controlled. Marcus couldn't argue with that. He had been around the palace long enough to know how things worked. Image was everything. The royal family's reputation was carefully guarded, and any threat to it was handled swiftly and efficiently. A pregnant 17-year-old princess would definitely qualify as a threat. You're right, Marcus admitted. They probably will try to control the situation. But you're also not powerless, Your Highness. You have more say than you think you do. Charlotte laughed bitterly. I'm 17. I can't even vote yet. How am I supposed to stand up to the Queen Mother and my parents and the entire royal establishment? Because you're carrying the next generation, Marcus said quietly. That gives you leverage, whether you realize it or not. And because eventually you'll be queen. They need you as much as you need them. The idea had never occurred to Charlotte. She had always thought of herself as the one who needed the institution, not the other way around. But Marcus was right. The monarchy needed heirs. It needed continuity. It needed her to play her part, even if that part had become infinitely more complicated. What do you think I should do? Charlotte asked, and there was something almost childlike in the question. For weeks, she had been pretending to be an adult, trying to handle an adult situation alone. But right now, she just wanted someone to tell her what to do. I think you need to see a doctor, Marcus said. Not a palace physician, not yet. I have a friend, Dr. Sarah Chen. She's discreet, and she works at a private clinic in London. She owes me a favor from when I helped her brother out of a tight spot. I can arrange for you to see her, no questions asked, no records that would make their way back to the palace. You would do that? Charlotte asked, surprised. You could lose your job. Worse, if they found out you helped me hide this. Some things are more important than a job. You need medical care, and you need time to figure out your next steps before the whole world descends on you. I can give you that time. Charlotte felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than panic. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't completely alone. Someone knew her secret and wasn't running to tell the palace. Someone was offering to help without trying to take over. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't even really know me, because I've watched you for 6 months, Marcus said. I've seen how hard you try to be perfect, how much pressure you put on yourself. I've seen you smile for the cameras when I know you're exhausted. I've seen you be kind to every single member of the staff, learning their names, asking about their families. You're a good person, Your Highness. You deserve support, not judgment. Charlotte wiped her eyes. Thank you, Marcus. I don't know what I did to deserve your help, but thank you. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said with a slight smile. We still have to figure out how to get you to the clinic without anyone noticing. The palace tracks your movements pretty carefully. Thursday, Charlotte said, thinking quickly. Thursday afternoon? I'm supposed to visit the Royal Academy of Music for a charity event. It's a small event, just a few photographers. My lady-in-waiting Margaret. She's been with the family forever. She's old-fashioned and strict, but she's also partially deaf. If we time it right, I could slip away for an hour. You could drive me to the clinic, and we could be back before anyone notices. Marcus nodded slowly. It was risky, but it could work. I'll contact Dr. Chen tonight and set it up. But Your Highness, you need to understand something. This only buys you time. Eventually, you're going to have to tell your parents. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be. I know, Charlotte said quietly. But I need to know what I'm dealing with first. I need to make sure the baby is healthy. And I need to talk to Daniel. Really talk to him, not just scared whispers in the garden. We need to figure out what we want before I face my family. What do you want? Marcus asked. If you could have anything, regardless of the palace, regardless of protocol, what would you choose? Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, really thinking about the question. What did she want? I want to keep the baby, she said finally. I want to be with Daniel. I want to finish school. I want to be a good mother and still be a good princess. I know that sounds impossible, but that's what I want. Then we'll work toward that, Marcus said. One step at a time. First, the doctor's appointment. Then you talk to Daniel. Then, together, you figure out how to tell your family in a way that gives you the best chance of getting what you want. Charlotte nodded, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. She stood up from the piano bench, her legs steadier now. I should get back to practicing, she said. People will wonder if I'm in here much longer without playing. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Your Highness, one more thing. That door was never locked. When you couldn't get out, that was the panic talking. Remember that. Sometimes the cages we think we're in are partly of our own making. Thursday afternoon arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Charlotte dressed carefully for the charity event at the Royal Academy of Music, choosing a pale blue dress that was appropriate for the occasion, but also loose enough to hide any subtle changes in her figure. She looked at herself in the mirror, turning sideways, but at barely 9 weeks, there was nothing visible yet. The secret was still hers to keep, at least for a little while longer. Margaret, her lady-in-waiting, fussed over her appearance as always. You look lovely, Your Highness. Though I do think you've lost weight. Are you eating properly? The elderly woman peered at Charlotte with concern. I'm fine, Margaret. Just busy with exams, Charlotte lied smoothly. She had become an expert at lying over the past few weeks. The realization made her sad. She had never been a dishonest person before all of this. The drive to the Royal Academy was uneventful. Marcus drove the car, his eyes occasionally meeting Charlotte's in the rear-view mirror. He gave her a barely perceptible nod. Everything was arranged. Dr. Chen was expecting them at her clinic in Knightsbridge, just a 15-minute drive from the academy. The charity event was smaller than Charlotte had expected. A handful of music students performed pieces they had been working on. Charlotte was supposed to present awards to the top performers. She smiled and clapped and said all the right things, but her mind was elsewhere. The clock on the wall seemed to move impossibly slowly. During the reception afterward, Charlotte saw her opportunity. Margaret was deep in conversation with the academy's director, discussing the history of the building. Charlotte touched her arm gently. "Margaret, I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back." The older woman nodded absently, too engaged in her conversation to pay much attention. Charlotte slipped away, her heart pounding. Marcus was waiting near a side exit, exactly where he said he would be. They moved quickly and quietly, leaving through a service entrance that led to an alley where Marcus had parked a second car. An unmarked sedan that wouldn't draw attention? 15 minutes there. 30 minutes for the appointment? 15 minutes back, Marcus said as they pulled into traffic. "We should be back before anyone misses you." Charlotte nodded, too nervous to speak. This was really happening. She was sneaking out of a royal event to see a doctor about a pregnancy she wasn't supposed to have with a boy the palace didn't know about. If anyone found out, it would be a disaster. Dr. Sarah Chin's clinic was discreet and elegant. Tucked between a bookshop and a cafe on a quiet street, they entered through a private entrance, and a receptionist led them immediately to an examination room. No waiting, no paperwork, no trail. Marcus had called in quite a favor. Dr. Chen was a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She shook Charlotte's hand warmly. "Your Highness, I'm glad Marcus convinced you to come see me. I understand this is a sensitive situation, and I want you to know that everything we discussed today is completely confidential. I don't keep digital records of appointments like this." Charlotte felt herself relax slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I appreciate your discretion." The examination was thorough, but gentle. Dr. Chen asked questions about Charlotte's health history, her symptoms, her last menstrual period. She performed an ultrasound, and for the first time Charlotte saw the tiny figure on the screen. It didn't look like much yet, just a small blob with a flickering heartbeat, but it was real. Her baby was real. "Everything looks healthy," Dr. Chen said, smiling. "Based on the measurements, I'd say you're about 9 weeks along. The heartbeat is strong. Have you been experiencing any morning sickness?" "Some," Charlotte admitted. "Mostly in the mornings, but I've been able to hide it." "That should start to ease up in another few weeks," Dr. Chen said. "I'm going to prescribe prenatal vitamins, but you'll need to be careful about how you get them. I suggest using a pharmacy outside of London, somewhere no one will recognize you." They talked through various options and scenarios. Dr. Chen was matter-of-fact about the choices Charlotte faced. Never judging, just presenting information. She could continue the pregnancy, or there were other options if Charlotte chose them. But Charlotte was clear. She wanted to keep the baby. "Then you'll need regular prenatal care," Dr. Chen said. "I can continue to see you privately, but eventually someone is going to notice. You can hide a pregnancy for a while, but not forever. Most women start showing between 12 and 16 weeks, sometimes later for first pregnancies, but it varies." "So I have maybe a month," Charlotte said. "A month to figure out how to tell my family?" "I'd recommend sooner rather than later," Dr. Chen said gently. "The stress you're under isn't good for you or the baby, and you'll need support, Your Highness. Pregnancy is hard enough without doing it alone." Charlotte left the clinic with a folder of information tucked into her bag and a prescription written under a false name. Marcus drove her back to the academy in silence, giving her time to process everything. When they pulled up to the same side entrance, he finally spoke. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," Charlotte admitted, "but also certain. Seeing the baby on the screen, hearing the heartbeat, it made everything real. This isn't just a problem to be solved. This is a person. My child, then you'll find a way," Marcus said. "You're stronger than you think." They slipped back into the academy building just as the reception was winding down. Margaret was exactly where they had left her. Now discussing budgets with the Academy's financial director? She looked up as Charlotte approached. "There you are, dear." I was beginning to worry. "Are you feeling well?" "You look flushed." "I'm fine," Charlotte said. "Just warm." "Shall we go?" The drive back to the palace felt different. Charlotte stared out the window at London, passing by, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. She thought about Daniel, about telling him that their baby was healthy, that she had seen the heartbeat. She needed to see him soon, needed to have the conversation they had been avoiding about what came next. That evening, Charlotte found a way to call him from her private phone, the one the palace didn't monitor as closely. Daniel answered on the first ring. "Charlotte, is everything okay?" "I saw the doctor today," she said quietly, checking to make sure her door was locked. "The baby is healthy. I'm 9 weeks along." She heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath. 9 weeks. That means we have about 3 weeks before I start showing. Maybe a month, if we're lucky. "Daniel, we need to talk. Really talk. About what we want. About how we're going to handle this." "Oh, can you get away?" Daniel asked. "Tomorrow night? There's a late-night concert at the Academy. I'm performing. You could say you want to attend, and afterward we could actually talk somewhere private. I'll make it work," Charlotte promised. "I have to go. Someone's coming." She hung up quickly as she heard footsteps in the hallway. A moment later, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find her grandmother, the Queen Mother, standing there with an unreadable expression. "Charlotte, dear, we need to talk." Charlotte's heart stopped. Had someone seen her leave the Academy? Had Dr. Chen's clinic been compromised? Had Marcus been questioned? She forced herself to remain calm, to keep her face neutral as she stepped aside to let her grandmother enter her room. The Queen Mother moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had spent 9 decades mastering the art of control. She settled into the chair near Charlotte's window and gestured for her granddaughter to sit on the bed. Charlotte obeyed, her mind racing through possible explanations and excuses. "Your lady-in-waiting tells me you've been unwell lately," the Queen Mother began. "Loss of appetite, fatigue, spending more time alone than usual. Margaret is worried about you." Charlotte chose her words carefully. "I've had a lot on my mind. Exams, preparations for the summer charity tours, the upcoming state dinner. It's been overwhelming." The Queen Mother studied her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "When I was your age, I also found Palace's life overwhelming. The expectations, the scrutiny, the constant performance. It's exhausting, isn't it?" "Yes," Charlotte admitted, surprised by the understanding in her grandmother's voice. "I want to tell you something that very few people know," the Queen Mother said. "When I was 19, I fell in love with someone completely inappropriate. A cavalry officer named James. He was handsome, charming, and entirely unsuitable for a princess. My parents forbade me from seeing him, but I was young and foolish and thought love conquered all." Charlotte listened, fascinated. Her grandmother never talked about her youth, never revealed anything personal. "We planned to run away together," the Queen Mother continued. "We were going to elope to Scotland. Consequences be damned. But the night before we were supposed to leave, James came to see me. He told me he couldn't go through with it. Not because he didn't love me, but because he did. He knew that taking me away from my duty would destroy me eventually. I would come to resent him, resent the life we built together, because I would always wonder what I had given up." "What happened to him?" Charlotte asked quietly. "He married someone else, had a family, lived a good life. And I married your grandfather, who was appropriate and suitable in everything a royal consort should be. I came to love him deeply. Though it wasn't the passionate romance I had imagined with James, but sometimes late at night, I still wonder what my life would have been like if I had gotten on that train to Scotland." Charlotte swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this, grandmother?" "Because I see in you the same restlessness I felt at your age. The same desire for something more than duty and protocol. And I want you to know that whatever decisions you make, whatever paths you choose, you don't have to make them alone. This family, for all its faults, is still a family. We protect our own." Charlotte felt tears welling up. This was the moment. She could tell her grandmother everything, could share the burden she had been carrying alone. But fear held her back. What if her grandmother's compassion only extended so far? What if the protection she offered came with conditions Charlotte couldn't accept? "Grandmother, if I told you something that could cause a scandal, would you still protect me?" The Queen Mother's expression didn't change. "Charlotte, I've weathered more scandals than you can imagine. I've seen this family through abdications, divorces, deaths, and disasters. We've survived it all because we've adapted when necessary and stood firm when required. Whatever you're facing, we can handle it." Charlotte took a deep breath. It was now or never. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was absolute. The Queen Mother's face remained impassive, but Charlotte saw her hands tighten slightly on the arms of the chair. Several seconds passed before she spoke. "How far along?" 9 weeks. "The father?" "Daniel Martinez. He's a music student at the Royal Academy. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. Does anyone else know?" Charlotte hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "Marcus Thompson, one of the guards. He found out by accident, but he's been helping me. He arranged for me to see a private doctor today." The Queen Mother nodded slowly. "I see. And what do you want to do?" The question surprised Charlotte. She had expected anger, disappointment, demands that she handle the situation in a specific way. But her grandmother was simply asking what she wanted. "I want to keep the baby," Charlotte said firmly. "I want to be with Daniel. I want to finish school and still fulfill my royal duties. I know that's complicated, maybe impossible, but that's what I want." "Nothing is impossible," the Queen Mother said. "Difficult, yes. Complicated, certainly. But not impossible." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds. "Your parents will need to be told. They'll be hurt that you didn't come to them first, but they'll manage. The palace will want to control the narrative, announce it on their terms." "I don't want them to force Daniel out of my life," Charlotte said. "That's my biggest fear, that they'll decide he's unsuitable and keep us apart." The Queen Mother turned to face her. "Your Daniel? Does he love you? Does he want to be a father?" "Yes, he's scared, but he's been supportive. He wants us to figure this out together, and we'll arrange for him to be thoroughly vetted. Background check, interviews, the works. If he passes, and if he truly loves you, then we'll work something out. The times have changed, Charlotte. An unwed mother with a child is no longer the scandal it once was, even for royals. We'll simply be ahead of our time." Charlotte couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm many things," the Queen Mother said. "Surprised, concerned, worried about the challenges ahead. But angry? No. You're 17 and in love, and about to become a mother. You need guidance and support, not anger and judgment. What about the media? The public? We'll handle them. We've handled worse." Queen Mother moved toward the door, then paused. "Charlotte, that guard who helped you, Marcus Thompson. He showed extraordinary judgment and compassion. Make sure he's protected. The palace doesn't always reward independent thinking, but in this case, it should be recognized." After her grandmother left, Charlotte sat on her bed, feeling like she had just survived a storm. The conversation had gone better than she could have imagined. Her grandmother, the most traditional member of the family, had offered support instead of condemnation. But Charlotte knew the hard part was still ahead. Her parents would need to be told. Daniel would need to meet the family officially. The media would eventually find out, and then the whole world would have opinions about her choices. The baby would be born into a spotlight she couldn't control. Yet for the first time in weeks, Charlotte felt like she could breathe. She wasn't alone anymore. She had her grandmother's support, Marcus's loyalty, Daniel's love, and a healthy baby growing inside her. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but at least now she could see a path. Charlotte pulled out her phone and sent a message to Daniel. "We need to talk. Tomorrow night after your concert, I have news both scary and hopeful. I love you." Then she opened her laptop and began researching young mothers who had finished school while raising children. If they could do it, so could she. She was a princess, yes, but she was also just a young woman trying to navigate an impossible situation. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the monarchy needed. Someone willing to show that duty and love didn't have to be mutually exclusive. That tradition could evolve without being destroyed. Outside her window, the sun set over London, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new decisions. But tonight, Charlotte allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The music room door had never actually been locked. She had just needed someone to help her see that she could open it herself.